Hello and welcome to Friday Double Bill, the show where we analyze and evaluate the latest films from Bollywood and Hollywood to help you make a more informed choice at the movies. I'm Fahad Samar and this is Mayank Shekhar.
Rang Rasiya, directed by Ketan Mehta, is a biopic on the 19th century master artist Raja Ravi Verma. While the film looks expansively at one of India's best-known painters' life, at the center of the story is a court case involving the artist's work. The case in the British Court of Law concerns a painting of a nude woman from Indian mythology that is considered to be an affront to both Hindu religion and Indian culture. While Raja Ravi Verma fights the case on his own, the film looks back at his journey growing up as a child in Kerala and establishing himself as a pioneer in the field of Indian arts. His patrons have been the kings of the princely states of Travancore and Baroda. This deeply seductive and a culturally relevant film stars Randeep Hooda as the artist and Nandana Sen as his lover and muse.
Mayank, in a time like this when religious intolerance, cultural intolerance, this imposing of what is correct and what is not by a moral majority, I think this is an extremely topical time. This film was so delayed in its release for whatever reasons, but it has huge impact and resonance for what it is trying to say. I mean, whether it is the battle of art versus commerce, whether it is about who decides what is art. But I felt that despite all these noble and lofty ideals that the film is espousing, it fell short for me, and very disappointingly so, at a purely cinematic level. I thought it was stilted, it was stodgy, and unfortunately the screenplay, the acting left a lot to be desired.
Well, I sort of agree with you, Fahad. I think one of the first things that you mentioned was the moral majority. I think we're not looking at moral majority anymore. We are looking at lunatic fringe that is becoming mainstream in this country. And from that perspective, I thought it was a very valid point being made through this movie, which makes it a very interesting film and also a very important film in its own right. But yes, I think somewhere, because it's a period film, I think it's marred by the scale. I think a period film, especially one that looks across the country and looking at 1800s, especially when it's about art in itself, so the setting becomes so important. I think they could have done with a little more money to make this film and given it this sort of scale that a movie of this nature demands. At least that is what we would expected. But yes, I mean, if you take that away, I was quite impressed with a lot of things that was going really well with this movie.
In many ways, I see the enormous parallels between Ketan Mehta and Raja Ravi Verma. I mean, there's the struggle between art and commerce, the ability, wanting to say certain things, finding it difficult to do that, having the resources to do that. Our censors have been extremely liberal in this case. I think they understood the artistic integrity of this film. They've allowed frontal female nudity.
Frontal nudity in that sense, but yeah, I mean, a whole lot better than you would imagine from
yes,
what they've been up to.
Yes, I mean,
yes.
If you've been keeping abreast of how things are going at the censor board,
right.
I think, we would agree. It's a very mature way of looking at it and not compromising artistic vision when otherwise their sources are happy.
Well, getting on to the oh my god or the OMG moments from this film, I think it's not so much about moments, to be honest with you, Fahad, but the fact that this is a story that I had no clue about. Not just in terms of course, we've all heard of Raja Ravi Verma and we can all do a Wikipedia search, but if we're movie buffs and we're told a story about a figure who has been so important and so pivotal to the art movement in India that it goes beyond the canvas and actually looks at the changes that took place in the artistic field itself was quite phenomenal for me to learn as a student rather than only a film goer. I mean, here is this guy who actually, or at least the film says, actually introduced block printing in India, which means two things. One, because he was doing mythologicals or religious figures, he got those figures, at least in two-dimensional form, out of the temple into people's homes, and everyone could view them. That also leads to the other thing of reprinting art, so it stopped being about canvas. Here is a guy who also was very much interested in photography, and what that led to in itself is something that is examined pretty well in this movie. My trivia discovery from this film, and that's also my oh my god moment, was his association with Dada Saheb Phalke, and the fact that in certain way he actually funded India's first film. So all of this put together makes him a very fascinating character, which if it wasn't for this film, I wouldn't have known.
Sure, absolutely. Just on that, the importance of this man, of course, can't be underestimated. Again, I think, there's an incredible parallel that I find in a very sort of sad and tragic way between M.F. Hussain and Raja Ravi Varma. I mean, of course, here's a Hindu, Keralite Hindu, from Travancore. Here is Hussain in this age. Both, without doubt, great artists. But the fact that they would be hounded and persecuted for essentially artistic expression. Of course, many, many years after Hussein's passing, it is still newsworthy to vandalize a public showing of his work. And, this is the tragedy, and I think Ketan has to be saluted for at least attempting to tell that, and to, hold a mirror up to all of us and say, look, this, if we are not careful, this is what we've become.
Well, we've already lauded the film's intentions, Fahad. We've also spoken about the relevance of this film to modern times, to art in general, not just in India but across the world at this point. I think when it comes to a verdict, it really boils down to what your expectations were. And frankly speaking, it was in 2007 or was it in 2008? I was at the London Film Festival, and this film was playing back then at the festival, which I decided not to catch purely because you thought, this is Ketan Mehta's movie. His previous film was with Amir Khan, The Rising, and of course this is going to get a release, but it's been so many years and we're still lying in the cans, and of course my expectations were hugely low in its own right, purely because there must be a reason. But I think they've trimmed about a good half an hour from the film, which also leads to a lot of missing elements in the storyline per se. And because my expectations were low, for me as a verdict, it's a choice between TV pe dekho ya theatre pe dekho, as in 2 stars or 3 stars. I think I was quite happy with the net result. I would go with theatre pe dekho.
I'm extremely happy to hear you say that, Mayank, because I completely agree in this case. This should be watched in the theatres. The fact that there's been so much sort of artistic integrity in this film, it does fail. There's a lot of Rang, a little bit of the creative juices I would have liked to have flown a little more. So little Russ, lots of Rang, but go ahead, watch Rang Rasiya.
Okay guys, that was Friday Double Bill from our end. Hey, tell us what you think of the show. Write to us, mail us, give us your feedback.